Welcome back to the Flying with the Flock podcast, the best place to get all of your Eagles and other NFL related news. I'm your host, Matt, and welcome to an interesting day where you're probably going to hear me rant a lot about the league, ladies and gentlemen. Before we get into this, I just want to say it would be much appreciated if you leave a like and subscribe down below. It would mean a lot to me, and well, I'm not going to change anything, but it'll sure mean a lot to me. I will say off the bat that this week has been kind of dry when it comes to NFL news. I know we've been in a little bit of a dry spell recently, especially after coming out of the free agent period. So this might be a little bit of a shorter episode this week, just so I can get done and get some work done as well on top of that. But without a further of ado, we can jump into the rule changes that the NFL proposed and the ones that were accepted. Let's see. All right, so we'll get into one that is obviously going to grind my gears the worst, but starting out somewhat simple. The league owners, approved a suggestion from the Philadelphia Eagles to give each team a guaranteed possession in overtime during the regular season. Previously, a team with the first possession could win in overtime if it scored a touchdown. This rule change aligns with the philosophy with a previous change to the postseason overtime, except regular season will now remain limited to only 10 minutes. In the playoffs, if you went into overtime, it could, and if teams go back and forth scoring touchdowns and so on, the game could extend for an unknown amount of time. Now, in the regular season, instead of adopting that exact thing, we still give both teams a shot at scoring, but within a limited time period. So, I feel that this is probably the right step towards bettering the game as a whole. I always did find it a little bit silly that if you got the ball first and you went down and scored a touchdown, that was game over for the other team. And obviously, we saw this being talked about, especially 2 seasons ago, when the Bills did not get a shot at getting a drive to drive down the field against the Chiefs in the playoffs back in, I want to say, like the 2022-2023 season. But now the Eagles have suggested, and now the NFL has adopted this idea that give both teams a fair shot at it, and then if both fail, whoever scores the next point, it's only fair that they will ultimately win the game. So I'm not sure how this is going to work, especially with defensive turnovers. Say if you're a quarterback, you throw an interception on and you're the team that goes first. I'm not sure if the other team scores and that's game, or if they get another shot. I would assume that would be game, but it's currently unknown. So as of right now, I do feel like this is a solid step in the right direction. I would want to see, not expanded upon, but I would like to see it more in depth. And because we're definitely going to see a couple situations where this comes down to both teams having it, and then where do we go from here? All right, so that's just my thoughts on the first rule changed. Let's see. I'm not talking about any like the celebration stuff because that's all kind of stupid anyway. Let's see. Phone call. No. Approved. Oh, so this is interesting. And I was listening to former punter for the Indianapolis Colts, Pat McAfee, talk about this. It was approved that a request from multiple teams to allow team staff to prepare K-balls, footballs used only on special teams before game day. This is going to change if everything is true the way that sounds, this is going to change special teams. We might see balls hit further. A lot of times, what teams have to do is they have these special team balls and they have to break them in right before the game. So you get 30 minutes supervised. You can break in all the balls you want, but it's only 30 minutes. And in that short amount of time, although it does break it in enough to make it malleable to fit around the punter or kicker's foot, in the same vein, it is definitely more uncomfortable to use. It feels like you're kicking more plastic than anything, apparently. So I do feel like that this is a solid rule change here. We might see kickers and punters kicking the ball further because of this, and I don't hate it. There might be a couple of times where it's like, okay, has this team juiced the ball a little bit more, or what have they done to this ball more? We might see that a couple times. We might see a period still, a longer period, a day or two before the game, in which they have to be supervised by not even officials, but by the league themselves to make sure nothing's happening. So ultimately, again, another good step in the right direction for the NFL as a whole. And this might make special teams a little bit more fun in the sense that we're going to see better kicks out of those kicking the ball. So a nice rule change, a solid step further. Let's see. Okay. Next up, this one's interesting. I don't love this one. They tabled for further discussion on the Detroit Lions proposal to make playoff seeding based on regular season records as guiding principle rather than division championships. This, in my opinion, would kill rivalries. The reason why the AFC North plays so hard against one another is they know that their record, they just have to beat whoever's in first place in their division. They just got to pummel them, hit them as hard as they can, and vice versa. The person in first place in that division knows they have to play their best, especially against these division rivals. Why do you think the Ravens versus Steelers, or the Ravens versus Bengals, or Steelers versus Bengals are such strong rivalries, especially in the past few years? It's because that these teams have to push one another and challenge one another to be the best version of themselves. Yes, was it a shame that the Vikings got the 5th overall seed at 14-3? Yes, but at the end of the day, if you weren't good enough to perform better within the division, and if you weren't able, they had a shot to take it away from the Lions and become the 1st overall seed. But if you do not play to your best standard when the lights shine brightest, it should not. We should not pity you. You should have to play the best possible game you can against your division rivals. These are some of the most important games. Yes, you could have Super Bowl matchups, which are good games, or juggernauts going at one another. But the reason why division rivalries, even back in the late 90s, early 2000s, think about Manning versus Brady. Those guys were division rivals for a little while until everything got jumbled back up. So these two teams push each other to be the best version of themselves. And if we're not going to hold other teams accountable to becoming the best version of if we're not going to hold ourselves to be accountable to be the best version, best football teams of ourselves, then why should we expect other teams to do that? Yes, is it upsetting that a team like one of the teams out of the NFC South gets a home playoff game? Sort of, but we saw that didn't even matter when the Commanders went up against the Buccaneers. So at the end of the day, it doesn't entirely matter. If you play your best possible game when the lights shine the brightest, this shouldn't be a problem. And yet we're trying to give people the benefit, not ease people, but take it easier on teams that need to prove themselves when the lights shine brightest. And the Vikings are one of the biggest teams that have to do that, especially this coming year. So I don't entirely agree with the Lions on this stance that we need to have seeding based off a regular season. That's just not how this should work. This will kill the game if this gets passed. The NFL also announced that they are going to use Sony's Hawkeye technology to measure first downs in 2025. Honestly, good move. I'm a fan of tennis, and tennis uses pretty well, especially on, especially on grass courts and hard courts. This is used fairly frequently, especially during challenge calls, and it's fairly accurate as well. Um, I fully believe, and we're seeing this in the UFL. I sat down and watched a UFL game this past weekend, and I saw the same technology being used, and it worked pretty well. It showed that the runner was short by zero point 0.2 inches, which is still, although in the NFL, especially with the old ways, that might be a first down. Here, they marked them short, and they have to run another play to get that first down. So I do feel like it will ultimately challenge. And if people complain about the brotherly shove, let's say, if we have this technology and you're complaining that they didn't make the first down, we have the technology to prove it now. So ultimately, this is another good step in the right direction for the NFL. This doesn't mean we're getting rid of the chains and the chain gang. Just they will be the backup in case the Sony Hawkeye technology goes down. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see how they implement this in a game. What's the first big game that when this call is going to come in, and how much is it going to affect the game as a whole? I do feel like that it's going to take some getting used to, and preseason is definitely going to be the area where we're going to see a lot of glitches and mistakes. But I do fully endorse this idea, and I do fully believe that this is the right step forward for the NFL as a whole. All right. What else? Oh, okay. So they moved. I don't like this. So originally last season, with the new dynamic kickoff system, if the receiver had a touchback, or the kick was a touchback, let's say, the ball was placed at the 30-yard line. Even I thought this was a little bit too far. You're penalizing special teams for having a good kicker, and ultimately you are making it easier for offenses to drive down the field with less yards to go. I didn't feel like this was the entirely right direction, and I still hoped for the original kickoff system to come back. And unfortunately, based off of this new rule change, it doesn't seem like the original kickoff is coming back anytime soon, if ever. Let's see. The NFL owners agreed to move a touchback from the 30-yard line to the 35. And yes, 5 yards may, in the grand scheme of things, not seem too much of a difference. But if you think about it, this is now only, 65 yards that a team now has to drive to score a touchdown, compared to the maybe 70 yards, which is still a decent amount. Don't get me wrong. But instead of doing the sensible thing and taking the ball and kicking it back from further and trying to emphasize having a kicker with a bigger leg and more accuracy, we instead penalize the defense and make them have to play better football, more cohesive football against better offenses. And ultimately, this is the same theme that we've been seeing for over a decade now. The NFL has been penalizing defenses, and in turn, they've been making the game a little bit softer. They've been allowing offenses the benefit of the doubt, and they give them the extra boost, which gives the NFL the extra ratings. And I know it's all about the money. I understand. But at the same time, we cannot keep coddling these offenses. We saw what happens if you take a coddled offense in a Super Bowl and put it against the number one defense. The number one defense is going to win every time. And at the end of the day, if you want more Super Bowls like what just happened in Super Bowl 59, then keep doing rules like this. Keep penalizing defenses from playing harder. Keep penalizing defenses by making offenses go a shorter amount of the field. Ultimately, I believe this is one of the bigger mistakes that has come out of this entire thing. And although I've been saying, especially with the last few rules, that it's a step forward for the NFL, this, in my opinion, is a major step back, and it shows me in the future we're going to continue to see the NFL favor offenses, and defense will become less and less prominent unless we have multiple teams come up with just these stout defenses that ultimately don't get penalized even if they hit hard. So, and I enjoyed, and I'm going back to the UFL here. When I was sitting down, I was enjoying watching hard hits because these guys have something to prove. But at the same time, now these guys in the NFL are coddled, and at the same time, we're not helping the product as a whole. We're more hurting it, and we're hurting our image as a sports league, which has hurt so many different sports leagues around the world. But at the end of the day, I can't do anything about it. I don't think the NFL fans could do anything about it. And it's just really upsetting to see the NFL head in this direction. Alright, so the last thing I wanted to talk about coming out of these meetings was and we touched on this earlier, the possibility that the brotherly shove could get banned. And I've fully accepted it. I don't really care at this point. I think it's weak if the NFL bans it. And I think that people are just going to try to ban it because the Eagles are the only team that can run it successfully, and nobody has done a good job coaching it and sitting down, analyzing the film. Rather, they make excuses for themselves, and it goes back to the same point I just made. The Packers lost twice to the Eagles by double digits. All right? Let that sink in. You guys had 2 shots to beat us. One in Brazil and one in the playoffs, and you failed to do both. You are trying to penalize a team in which that can do something well that nobody else can do. Let's think about this for a second. There are no, and I mean 0, indications of possible injuries that have come from this play. The NFL has proved it themselves. They came out and say there is no data whatsoever supporting that the brotherly shove leads to injuries. So then why do we have all these weak head coaches? Let's go down the list, shall we? Matt LaFleur. Weak. Let's see. He can't win. Let's put it that way. He can't find a way to win when it matters most, and he leached off of Aaron Rodgers for years, and now he has to build something, and so he's lashing out. Let's go to the next team, Buffalo Bills. Bills, you guys ran the same play, the second most in the NFL. All right? At the end of the day, you guys are complaining that it didn't work for you against the Chiefs in the playoffs this past year. Let's break this down. You guys ran the same play twice. You ran the quarterback to the right side of the line where the Chiefs stacked their defense and expected to pick up a yard against that defense if you ran the same play twice. That is never going to work, and again, it proves Sean McDermott doesn't know how to win in big game situations. He's going to call the same plays, and he's going to hinder Josh Allen's career as a whole if he is not fired and if they do not change their mentality from this. Let's go to the next team that I've seen talk about it. The Dallas Cowboys. You guys are jokes. Alright, I've said it. I will continue to say it. I will say it until I die. You guys are genuinely jokes. And you're only doing this because it's your division rival, is the only one that can pull it off, and we're going to constantly run it against you guys until the end of time. Enough said. Finally, the last person trying to spearhead this the most, Sean McVay and the Rams. Sean McVay admitted, by the way, that any short yardage play, whether it's a run play, a pass play, or the brotherly shove, can result in a high percentage of possible injury. Then he goes on to saying, around 5 minutes later, that the brotherly shove is the only short yardage play that we should be concerned about. Okay, rewind the tape here. You are an amazing offensive mind, but you're weak. You run high-flying offenses that are not physical, and your receivers get taken out of play because your quarterback puts balls in the wrong position and he throws hospital passes. Safeties take your wide receivers out of the games, and that's why they're injured so early on in the season. You do not build a good mentality for your team. You do not build a good culture. And at the end of the day, that's why you will not win. You will not win again, in my opinion. Until these teams step up and take accountability for, hey, we're not winning. What's going on here? What's going wrong? What can we fix? That's when, if they come back with nothing and they continue to win, then I'd be fine with a possibility that they would ban it. And obviously you have a lot of different teams that have stemmed from the Eagles and other hard-nosed, especially player coaches like the Dan Campbells, DeMeco Ryans of the world, saying, hey, this plays fine. We cannot penalize a team because they are so good at a play. That is on us to try to figure it out. We've had teams like the Colts GM and their head coach come out, obviously. Shane Steichen used to be under he ran the brotherly shove as the Eagles offensive coordinator. Jonathan Gannon, head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, came out and said he has no problem with the play. This is coming from a defensive-minded head coach, mind you, that's looking to stop the offense. And he has no problem with a play that is nearly unstoppable because of the Eagles' offensive line. Who else? There's one more person that Sirianni mentioned directly, but he had coaches like Mike Tomlin, Dan Campbell, DeMeco Ryans. I feel like Shanahan might have said that he was in favor for it. I forget what he said entirely. But you have these veteran coaches saying, hey, it's on us to figure this out. And you have a lot of these younger guys who are getting frustrated with the play, not being able to fully commit. And at the end of the day, it's on other NFL teams. It should not be on the Eagles to try to make this play easier. And it goes back to what I said like 10 minutes ago about the entire league trying to coddle certain aspects of the game to make it more quote-unquote fun for everyone. If you look at it, it was a 16-16 split. Half the league believes that it is a perfectly fine play and we should not penalize a team for running it well. The other team believes in a bunch of bogus that injuries are a possibility. And still, the wuss that the NFL is, push back the date that they would continue this discussion. What do you mean? They were 8 people short from passing it. That means it failed. That does not mean we table this for later. Alright? This is genuinely becoming a joke at this point. That the NFL, if they don't love something, they continue to kick the can down the road until they're able to get people to lobby towards them, towards what they want. And they want pretty high-flying offenses, not gritty offenses that can go out and win championships. And if I continue to keep talking about this, I might genuinely explode right now. So I'm going to move on. But just know in May, we're going to come back. And if it fails again, I'm genuinely going to laugh the hardest I ever have at all the other teams that voted against the brotherly shove. Alright, just some quick more stories that I have to touch on. As of right now, according to a lot of insiders, it seems like the Titans are most likely going to take Cam Ward at the number 1 pick. This is not really surprising. Obviously, my past 2 mock drafts, I've had Cam Ward going number 1 overall to the Tennessee Titans. Obviously, Tennessee built their offensive line a little bit. They definitely targeted the left tackle spot in the free agency, which is a smart idea. My only concern is who's Cam Ward throwing to if he goes to Tennessee? You have Calvin Ridley, and that's really it. Is Treylon Burks even still there? I'm not even sure. Treylon Burks. Oh, he's still on the Tennessee Titans, so alright. So you have Treylon Burks, who I believe could develop if you give him the proper guys around him. And you also have Calvin Ridley, which isn't horrible, but it's not good for a rookie quarterback. So I do pray for Cam Ward, but as of right now, it seems like he's going to be going number 1 overall, which I completely agree with. I'm not sure there's a better quarterback than him in this draft, or if there's even a quarterback at his caliber in this draft as a whole. So congratulations, Cam Ward. It seems like you're going number 1 overall, so enjoy it while it lasts. But you got to get to business, and it's not going to be fun, especially your first couple of years. Next thing I want to touch on was Aaron Rodgers still hasn't made a full decision on whether he's going to the Steelers or retiring. According to several rumors right now, it seems like that he's going to make a decision closer to the draft. So in a little bit less than a month here, we're going to know whether Rodgers retires or he signs with the Steelers. I could definitely see him signing with the Steelers late, and then signing like a 1-year deal, and then the Steelers drafting a guy in the late 5th, 6th round. Maybe a Riley Leonard if he's still on the board, a Will Howard if he slides that far. But bringing in a young guy to sit behind Rodgers for a year and make it clear to Rodgers, hey, you're here for a year. After that, we got to go our separate ways because we're bringing in a guy to learn from you. You do not have to groom him to become the next starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but at least try to teach him 1 or 2 things and then move on. So yeah, as of right now, I would like to believe that the Steelers will most likely sign Aaron Rodgers a little bit before the draft. I also do want to address my last mock draft. I will say Shedeur Sanders, according to a lot of the rumors, he went a lot lower than where people think he's going to go. I had him possibly falling to like the Steelers. Some people have him going as late as 9. Some people have him going as early as 2. From right now, it seems like the Giants are out of the quarterback race, at least in the draft-wise, because Brian Daboll made some comments that made it seem like they weren't really enamored with too many quarterbacks after Cam Ward, which is understandable for a Shedeur Sanders. He's not like an athletic freak. He's a pocket passer. He'll get the ball on target. He just doesn't have a giant arm for the most part. Now, that doesn't mean he can't rocket it down the field every once in a while. Just you're not going to see a Cam Ward giant arm down the field constantly. So I do feel like Shedeur Sanders, and we'll see. I got one more mock draft. I got my 3.0 coming up roughly, not next week, but I'm going to do it the following week. Yeah, so, no, not next week. maybe on the 23rd, because the draft is the 24th of this month. So on the 23rd, I'll release my last draft special, and we'll see how many I get right based off of that. But as of right now, it does seem like Shedeur Sanders is going to, as a whole, rise possibly to 2, possibly to less. I mean, I've seen wild things like Jackson Dart going in the first round, going all the way at 9, which I don't love, only because he's not as proven as the other two. As much as, and I watched a few Ole Miss games this past season, and as much as I do love him, he's not on the same level as a definitely not a Cam Ward, not a Shedeur Sanders. He's like the third level. He would be a solid second round pick who I could see a team like, if the Steelers want to take a guy in the second round, the Steelers take him in the second round. Or if the Rams see him, the Rams see him. Or if the Saints, I don't feel like the Saints should burn a first round pick on a quarterback, but if he's there in the second round, you take him. It's just that simple. So there are a few teams where I could see Jackson Dart landing, but there's no way he's going in the first round. And I feel like Shedeur might go, if he doesn't go second, he might take a little bit of a slide there. And I'm not entirely sure where he would land. Lastly, the NFL is currently discussing with the NFLPA the safety of an 18-game season. This is kind of wild to me. I'm kind of a fan with how it is now. I wouldn't really want another game. And it would just mean, and I think the plan is to eventually have like one international game a week throughout almost the entire season, which I'm not a huge fan of. I feel like, especially in the beginning, because we don't want a game that matters a lot on an international stage. We rather have that at home. All right? I do not feel like this is a smart idea. We've seen this from the NFL before back in the 90s when they expanded their reach over to Europe heavily. And they even founded their own football league over in Europe. But it was never successful because they could not find the best market. And I still feel like the same still exists now, where soccer is dominant overseas and football, we can dominate certain markets, especially certain South American markets, maybe Australia, Canada. We already have a stranglehold on, so I wouldn't hate that. I wouldn't hate just keeping it the same and less international games than what they're trying to do. On top of that, they're trying to get like a game in the UAE, or the United Arab Emirates. But ultimately, that will probably take a couple of years to come through. We might be talking like into the 2030s by the time that happens. And I will be old. And at the end of the day, I will probably not care if it's an international game at that point. I will just want to watch my birds until the end of time. Alright, so that's it for this episode. I do apologize for this shorter episode. I'm dealing with a lot of stuff right now. And I just... I appreciate you guys stopping by this episode, and we will continue next week, or I might take a week off next week. I know I'm going away over next weekend, so it all depends if I have to pack and stuff like that. So we'll see. If I tweet out that I have an episode coming, then you guys will see it, hopefully, if you follow. So with all that being said, everybody have a good rest of your day, and remember, go Birds.